You're listening to an exclusive episode of the NK News podcast, available only to subscribers. You can listen to this and other episodes from your preferred podcast player by accessing the private podcast feed. For more detailed instructions, please see the step-by-step guide on the NK News website at nknews.org/private-feed. It's Jacco here with a quick note before this episode begins. I'm recording this note after recording the actual episode because when I did the episode, I wasn't sure that it was going to be successful. So here's what I mean. In this episode, I'm doing something different. I'm actually interviewing two people, one after the other, both men, Rowan from Young Pioneer Tours and Vaczi from Koryo Tours. Both are from companies that lead tourists to North Korea. And of course, they haven't done that for 5 years. But this week, they've both just come out of North Korea after a 5-day trip. They're the first representatives of Western tour companies, as far as I know, to enter North Korea since early 2020. So I thought it was a good time to get their stories about what they saw in there. Both men, when I interviewed them, were at Yanji Airport in northeast China, transitioning out of North Korea and back to where they came from. And at the time, given the Wi-Fi and the audio, I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to talk to both of them, but I was. And so that's why I didn't introduce this episode properly at the beginning of my first interview with Rowan, because I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to get Gregor Vaczi on as well. So here we go. You've got 2 episodes back to back, both about the exact same thing. What's it like to visit North Korea for the first time in 5 years? And they didn't go to Pyongyang. They went to Rason, or formerly known as Rajon Sonbong, twin cities up in the far northeast of Korea. So we hope you enjoy this very special episode. Hello, podcast listeners. Welcome to the NK News podcast. I'm your host, Jacco Zwetsloot, and this episode was recorded in a rush on the afternoon of Monday, the 17th of February, 2025. And I'm talking to Rowan from Young Pioneer Tours, who has just come out of North Korea, one of the first people from non-Russia and non-China to visit North Korea since the beginning of the pandemic. Rowan, welcome on the show.
Hello, Jacco. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. And yes, you used the correct term. I've just arrived here in Yanji, China.
And you've spent how many of the last week? 4 days, 5 days in Rason?
Yeah, I've spent 5 days in North Korea, 5 very progressive and productive days.
Okay, well, let's start from the start. When was the last time you were in North Korea? Because, of course, you ran many, many tours over the years into North Korea.
Yeah, I've been to North Korea 100 times, and my last tour to North Korea was the week before they shut it all down. It was in January 2020.
Goodness me. Okay, so it's been 5 years and a month. And when did you find out that you'd be able to go back there?
So January 16th, I received confirmation from my partners in Beijing, Pyongyang, and Rason that Rason, the Special Economic Zone, was opened to tourism. And there was a few people who were skeptical about this. But the moment I heard about this, when I was in Abu Dhabi in the UAE, jumped on a flight, went straight to China, met my Korean partners in Beijing, spoke to them about it. And they were very excited about the news, but they were still waiting for further confirmation. Gently pressured them and pushed them to be like, listen, let's not have another false start on DPRK tourism returning. We need to make this one the one, which they were fully on board with. And then I continued my way.
Did it seem clear to you from your partners in Beijing that although they might have been on board with everybody going into Rason, that it wasn't really up to them to decide, that it's kind of out of their hands a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. As much as on board as they are, but of course they're going to be on board. They're involved in the tourism industry. So their business, their livelihood relies on this happening.
Yeah.
And they've been encouraging this for a good 2 years now, since COVID well and truly finished.
Yeah.
So, well, in the tourism industry aspect anyway.
Did you get any sense from them why it's taken 2 years since COVID finished?
The DPRK central government, they just weren't ready for tourism yet. They're still, and that goes further into like what I saw, what I experienced in Rason. Once I was there, we'll get into that further later. But
I want to get into that very, very soon. Yeah.
Well, we shall. But yeah, initially he was keen, I was keen, and he's like, listen, there's some obstacles. The best way to approach this, you need to go to Yanji. You need to meet with the Chinese and North Korean representatives up there.
Uh-huh.
I did that the very next day. Flew to Yanji, met with both representatives, spoke to them about the importance of DPRK reopening, not making this a false start. Let's not lose hope for those wanting to travel to DPRK, and also protecting the DPRK's image in tourism and foreign engagement, because it's one of the very few engagements they have that's not sanctioned. It's allowed, and people are more open to approach. And it took over 2 weeks back and forth in Yanji, which was a great place to stay, but some very nice conversations, nothing too harsh, very gentle pushes in the right direction, which they were finally able to get on board with. And they allowed me and my business partners here at Young Pioneer Tours to visit last week on Thursday, which, even though that was allowed, they were still skeptical if the Chinese would allow us. And when the whole thing happened, it wasn't a problem at all. We spoke very openly with the Chinese immigration. We said, like, listen, yes, this is a business delegation. We're going there for business reasons. But when we leave the DPRK, we are hoping that once we leave, tourism will start. And if you have any issues with tourists entering from this border into DPRK, tell me now. And they said, yeah, no problems. We don't have a problem. As long as they have a valid visa to enter DPRK, they literally said, we don't care. And that was the best response for me to receive. And that's what gave me the confidence to further go into Rason, speak with those responsible with controlling this and making sure this can well and truly happen.
Yeah. Now, YPT, of course, is it's one of several companies that have done business with North Korea over the years, tourism. So was yours the only group that went into Rason last week, or were there others too?
So there was 4 of us from Young Pioneer Tours that crossed the border on the same day. We also had Greg from Koryo Tours with us, and we were bundled together in the same delegation, although the company kept us separate. But we met up. We were at the same hotel, and we also have the same purpose of showing evidence of, to further encourage them to, listen, this demand is real. We want this. Please make this happen.
And I mean, presumably you were all part of that negotiation together with the Chinese and the North Koreans in Yanji. Do you know what it was that made the tipping point that sort of convinced them that, we should go ahead with this?
It was honestly, it was a gentle harassing. Every day, being in China, being in Beijing, being in Yanji, it was, okay, what's the news, guys? I had a group tour scheduled today on the 17th of January to enter Rason. I had 24 people paid deposits. They were ready to enter the country today. And I was informed of last week they had to be canceled. And I told them, this is the worst thing to do. Come on, you said you were opened. You're not opened. This is a horrible impression to make, which, I had to work through that with each individual person. And thankfully, they were very understanding, because they knew they were pushing the boundaries of being the first to re-enter the DPRK for the first time in 5 years as a true tourist. But this helped me apply extra pressure on the Koreans to be like, listen, this is happening. I'm treating this as a real thing, and I need you to treat it as such. And that was received, very well. They felt bad about it too. And they're like, listen, we are sorry for this. And okay, let's make this a smooth start as possible.
Now, Rowan, did you get the feeling at any stage that you were talking to or negotiating with people from the North Korean security apparatus?
No, I was talking directly to those in the tourism industry. So I was speaking to representatives of the Chinese and the Korean side in Yanji. And when I went into DPRK and Rason, I was speaking directly to the travel company that we work with, which is the Rason International Travel Agency. And they were speaking to the committee that they had to prove that they had to make this happen. And of course, they were on our side. They also wanted to make this happen. They've been doing tourism for a year now with the Russians. They recently finished a Russian group 2 weeks ago. So they're used to how to handle foreigners. And they're willing to open up to further foreigners. So that wasn't such a hard push for them, but I had to give them the evidence that, yes, like Westerners are indeed interested in returning to DPRK. It's not just us trying to start or restart a false business. This will be a true business worth their efforts. And this is the proof I have with this group that you canceled. And I have many more groups willing to come. So let's actually make this happen, guys.
I'm itching to ask you about Rason, but before we do, I've got two quick questions for you. First one is, did you get a sense from them why Russians were allowed in first for so long with no Westerners? And the second question, do you know why Rason is only open and not Pyongyang?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, I'd say the first one, yeah, the Russians were allowed in for the obvious reasons. And I didn't even need to talk about it with the Koreans. It was because of the political friendship they have between the two countries. And a lot of people think like, okay, so Russians enter the country understanding more of DPRK and they leave without a problem. Russians are still foreigners, and the North Korean society and the system that how it operates is still very foreign to Russians. And I actually had a good chance to speak to the Koreans I was involved with, and they were like, "Yeah, we Russians are okay, but they still take many photos. They still ask like, these kind of questions that are hard to ask, and they're asking the same things that Westerners and the Chinese will also eventually ask as tourists going to the DPRK." And why is Rason the first region to open before Pyongyang? You know what? When I first heard the news that, hey, listen, Rason's opening, it's happening now. It's happening right now. They accepted it. It did. I was like, okay, I accepted it as first. And I just went, you know what? That does kind of make sense because my experience in Rason, like going to Rason now, that was my 5th time in Rason. And my experience with it before, it is a much more open area. You don't need a tourist visa to go to Rason. You just need an entry permit, which, to people that can be like, oh, that's the same thing, right? It's not. It's a much different process. Rason is much, much more open to tourists than Pyongyang. And that's why Rason has always expected more tourist numbers than Pyongyang. The only thing they're lacking is just the wham bam, the glory, the whole spectacle that you get from the southern region and the other areas that Pyongyang gives you access to, rather than Rason, which Rason just gives you direct access to North Hamgyong province, Hamgyongbukdo, straight to Chongjin, which is possible. And we've done that before. We've connected the tours, but that's a more of a specific special interest compared to what tourists are attracted to the capital, which is Pyongyang.
Right. Well, tell us about Rason. What did you see? What was new? What was the same? How was the vibe? Curious to hear the rest? Become an NK News subscriber today for access to the full episode. Head to nknews.org/join for more information. If you're already a subscriber to NK News, you can listen to full episodes from your preferred podcast player by accessing the private podcast feed. For more detailed instructions, please see the step-by-step guide on the NK News website at nknews.org/private-feed.